Hello and welcome to this Against the Storm tutorial on Biomes. As I mentioned in the introductory tutorial, this series will be covering all aspects of the gameplay, all the various features and mechanics of the game. However, with the game still being in early access, some of these aspects may be altered slightly or greatly throughout the development period. When that happens, I plan to provide some kind of update, either with an updated tutorial video or at a minimum as a pinned comment. With that said, let's get started. In Against the Storm, there are 5 biomes currently. The first one, the one you played through in the tutorial, is the Royal Woodlands. The Royal Woodlands is the Queen's Forests are once part of the Smoldering City, but the Blightstorm reclaimed this land. The Royal Woodlands are rich in roots, moss broccoli, grass-capped mushrooms, and flax, with decent amount of dewberries and clay. The ground is fertile and soft, and that makes it perfect for farming. So in this map you can expect a decent amount of farmable soil, and we can expect quite a bit of supplies available in the trees and on the ground. The trees will naturally produce wood, of course, but then they have a lesser chance to produce things like resin, and plant fiber, and eggs. These resources are used for various crafting processes, and specifically for the eggs, they are used as food, in addition to some crafting processes. And not just food crafting either. The eggs can be used to craft non-edible items as well. And then also they contain quite a few resources on the ground here in the Royal Woodlands. Clay, plant fiber again, eggs again, roots, berries, meat, mushrooms, vegetables, sea marrow, and insects. Many of these resources are inedible, but there are quite a few here that were actually edible. Actually, more than half of them are edible indeed, including the things like the insects and the eggs and roots that we've talked about. Mushrooms, of course, vegetables, and meat are all edible. Clay is used for crafting pottery, as well as a few other items, as an ingredient in a few other items, and plant fibers is often used specifically for creating fabric. And then, of course, the other ingredients that are edible can be used for making food, for making advanced food. They can also be eaten raw, and they can be used, some of them can be used in other inedible recipes. And then finally, sea marrow, which is a fuel source. It can be used simply just as a burnable fuel, and it can also be used more specifically in the blight rot component of the game to make the fire that they use to burn the blight rot. Blight rot will, by the way, happen as another tutorial much later on in the series, as it is a newer and more advanced aspect of the game. The second biome you will probably encounter is the Marshlands. The Marshlands are a harsh and cold land that is claimed by different, extremely resilient species of fungi. The ground is very hard and rocky, and that makes it difficult to farm. It's famous for its abundant fauna and insects. So as the description implies, there is much less farmland in this biome than there was in the Royal Woodlands. Here on the map, we also have wood, mushrooms, and leather available from the trees. Yes, you get mushrooms and leather from the trees. And then on the ground, you should find eggs, stone, roots, meat, insects, mushrooms, clay, grain, coal, and copper. Of course, some of these are edible, some of them are not. The same ones, I believe, all appeared already in the Royal Woodlands, except grain. Grain is not directly edible. Yes, edible. You have to process it into flour before it can then be processed into some sort of a baked good before it's edible. But you can also use grain to make ale, which is an advanced ingredient for an advanced consumable, I should say, for one of the services offered. Humans and beavers both like to drink ale. Stone can be used in place of clay in a lot of resource crafting, a lot of crafting, except for pottery. Clay is the only ingredient that can be used to make pottery. Coal and copper can be found on the ground as well, and new to the update just before the Steam release, The copper and coal are now consumable, which they had not been for the entirety of early access up to this point. But they are consumed using a mine building, whereas the rest of the resources are gathered using various other types of camps. One thing I didn't mention, and I will go back, is the additional effects here on the Royal Woodlands, as there are additional effects here in the Marshlands. The first one here in the Marshlands is Gathering Knowledge. The Marshlands are a gatherer's paradise. Gathering speed is increased by 10% for every 2 workers assigned to gathering camps. And Giant Organisms. The Marshlands are home to enormous life forms. Giant resource nodes can be found in forbidden glades. Each glade will have a different one. These are really cool, and if you watch my series that's coming out simultaneous to this, eventually I will play Marshlands and I will open up a forbidden glade and show some of these giant organisms. They're really cool, and as it says, they do contain lots of resources, and there are 3 or 4 different types of giant organisms that you can gather from. Each one uses a different gathering camp type building, which we'll cover in the tutorial much later on buildings and gathering resources, but they each one takes a different type of camp to gather from. Back quickly to the Royal Woodlands. The only Royal Woodlands modifier is the Gift of the Woodlands. The Royal Woodlands are very lush and rich in timber. These trees give more wood. So it's a simpler biome, both in good ways and in bad ways. There's much less to do here, but there's also much less to negatively affect you here. The third biome in the game was the Scarlet Orchard. The Scarlet Orchard is on the slate for being redone in the coming updates over the next 6 months. It's on the current roadmap, but for now, at least, the Scarlet Orchard is a beautiful yet dangerous land that is colored in a strange shade of crimson. It's called the Herb Garden of the Kingdom due to the abundance of herbs, berries, and roots. So it has an average amount of soil, which is similar to the Royal Woodlands, and it has trees that produce wood, copper, resin, and plant fiber. So they're a little similar to the trees in the Royal Woodlands, except for the Royal Woodlands provides eggs. This provides copper, and the natural resources you can find on the ground are reeds, stone, roots, eggs, grain, herbs, berries, sea marrow, and copper ore. I believe we've seen all of these already, except for herbs and reeds. Reeds are used in the crafting of fabric, as well as some other crafting, and herbs are used in as an ingredient in things like pie and biscuits, and other and some other non-edible things. This is not directly edible, but it is edible similar to the way that grain is. You have to process it first, and then you can eat it. Okay, and the fourth biome that was added during the early access process is the Coral Forest. The Coral Forest has... Wait, did we look at the... We did not. Reinforced axes. The Scarlet Orchard has these 2 additional effects. Reinforced axes. Wood cutting is way easier. Woodcutter's camp production is 15% quicker. And Firekeeper's secret techniques. An old manuscript detailing forgotten burning rites. Fuel burns 25% longer in hearths. Which is kind of nice to have. These 2 come together to the point where you do not have a wood problem in this biome at all. It's kind of nice. Assuming you're burning wood in the hearths, this comes together really nicely. So the fourth biome is the Coral Forest. The true source of the coral growth is unknown. Contrary to common belief, it doesn't usually appear in flooded regions. The unique influence of the coral mutates trees into distinctive strands that offer various resources. So again, this has an average amount of soil. Its additional effects are diverse flora. Vegetation here mutates into unique strands. Each type of tree has distinct bonus resources. And inspiring pressure. The forest is as scary as it is beautiful. Villagers have a 5% chance for bonus yields from production and gathering for each hostility level. So these are also some very nice bonus effects here. The tree thing is really cool. There are 3 different types of trees in the coral forest. They all produce wood as their primary resource, but then they produce a secondary or 1 or 2 secondary resources depending on the type of tree. And I can never remember the types of trees, but the 5 things you can get as part of the secondary resource from the trees are plant fiber, meat, crystallized dew, stone, and incense. Take a look at those trees when you're inside the biome to see what resources they produce, and make sure you look for all 3 types of trees and focus on certain types of trees depending on what resources you may want to get from those trees. Also, here on the ground you can find eggs, stone, roots, vegetables, insects, herbs, reeds, and coal. I believe we've talked about every single one of these already, so we don't need to cover them again. And the 5th and final biome that's in the game at this point, at least, is the Cursed Royal Woodlands. Now, this is a special kind of biome because it is still largely the Royal Woodlands, but as the summary will tell us, a cursed area of the Royal Woodlands that is haunted by the lost souls of the warriors fallen in the Great Civil War. The storm here is especially dangerous, and the forest is more hostile than anywhere else. The Queen will handsomely reward any viceroy brave enough to settle this part of the world. So, as I said, it still is quite a bit the same as the Royal Woodlands, including with what you can gather from the trees and gather from the ground, but there are a few notable exceptions, and there are also 2 notable additional effects here that do not include the regular Royal Woodlands notable effect. The first one here is Restless Spirits. This land has seen a lot of bloodshed during the Great Civil War. Restless spirits can be found in the forest. So this, as you uncover different glades in the game, you will uncover these restless spirits that have some sort of task for you to do. So they may want you to bring them something, they may want you to do something, and then if you satisfy their task, then you'll get a reward. Some of them will give you a negative effect if you don't satisfy their task in time. Others will allow you to ignore them as you need to throughout the rest of your time in that settlement. The Cursed Battlefield. The forest has reshaped itself. It is impossible to recognize the danger of the glades, and their size has been made even. So no longer are the danger and forbidden glades marked, and all glades are the same size, so open glades at your own risk. So the trees contain, in addition to the normal wood, and for the Royal Woodlands, the normal resin and plant fiber, they contain roots instead of eggs. And then on the ground you will find, if not the exact same, pretty close to the same things as in the Royal Woodlands: clay, plant fiber, eggs, roots, berries, meat, mushrooms, vegetables, sea marrow, and insects. This biome, as you can see, is much less frequently found in the map. Even for as long as I've been playing this, there aren't very many Curse of Royal Woodlands tiles on the map. This is the save that I've been playing for the year now in Epic, and we'd only have these tiny few little spots here. Most of the map is taken up by really, actually, the Coral Forest, the Marshlands, and the Royal Woodlands. Even the Scarlet Orchard has kind of a secondary feel to it, and I think that's because of the planned rework of the Scarlet Orchard. Keep an eye out for that. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will update this tutorial in some manner with the information about the reworked Scarlet Orchard, but for now, at least, this information should hold true for a while. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.